I'm Sebastian. I'm a certified technical architect and the founder of Flow Republic, the elite Salesforce Academy. You might have heard about us. We've been coaching many CTAs successfully and help them pass their exam. We are trusted by individuals and offer academy programs for leading and established Salesforce partners such as Cognizant, Deloitte, IBM, PwC, Silverline, and many others. And this year has been really big for us. We just had 2 additional CTAs joining our team of coaches. And we're truly excited to announce many more offerings coming that will help you and other trailblazers to really unlock their true potential. Today, we are announcing our communication bootcamp that will really help you to boost your communication skills and blaze your trail to success. So, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining the talk, 5 Secret Weapons of a Great Architect and how to successfully apply them. My name is, and I'm sorry, I'm struggling a little bit with navigation today. So my name is Sebastian. I'm a certified technical architect and founder of Flow Republic, meaning I coach aspiring CTAs on their journey to CTA, and we're also launching a couple of other things. So have a look in our virtual booth. So today it's going to be about those secret weapons of a great architect. But before, let's have a look into the scenario that we're going to use to kind of explore those weapons. We're going to engage with a company called Forbidden Fruit, and they are in the consumer electronics industry. I guess everybody can imagine what their company might be. However, NDA, so we're not going to talk specifics. The business model they are following is B2C and B2B, and their sales channels include an online shop as well as distribution via resellers. And the focus for our scenario is going to be to implement a sales process on Salesforce. Okay, so that's what we're going to work with, just to make this a little bit more tangible and not bore you with too much theoretical details. But first of all, let me ask you, what do you think makes a good architect, or even a great one? And you might be able to grasp the answer by just looking at those cubes. So what you can see here on the right side is a so-called Necker illusion. And what you can see is depending when you're looking at it, you might actually see either a cube in this particular form or this particular form. So that kind of gets us to the point, what makes a great architect? First of all, it's perspective. So being able to look at something from different angles, from different perspectives, to apply models and abstract through models, to gain an understanding and really being able to fully comprehend what is going on, and communication. I'm going to give another talk on powerful communication and soft skills later today. I highly recommend attending that talk if you want to learn more about soft skills. But now enough talking, let's go into the first weapon. It's the so-called business capability map, or in short form, taking a view from above. So what this is it is a model that describes what the business does in order to reach its objectives, the so-called capabilities, instead of what it actually does. And why is that important? Because as architects, we need to be able to take a larger perspective a larger view from the business perspective. And when we do that, we want to be technology and system agnostic. Even so, we're working in the Salesforce ecosystem. Doesn't mean we have to do everything with Salesforce, or even should do everything with Salesforce. And taking this elevated view can hint potential solution components. So let's take a very concrete example here. And I'm not going through everything. You will be able to see the recording. You will have access to the presentation later to kind of refer back. But the business capability map has different kinds of domains that you can see here. This is normally defined by a business architect. So it's not necessarily expected for you as a technical architect or solution architect to produce that, but your customer should normally have something like that available. And for each of those business domains or the capabilities, it actually describes what they do. So if you look into the B2C process, they need to have customer master data, they need to have a product catalog in order to support the online shop, and they want to do payments. Now for B2B, They want to manage their pipeline, pricing, dealing, generate contracts, etc., etc. So once we kind of gotten this understanding, we can now start creating a joint view between business and IT. So we talked about B2B and B2C, and how does it now work? So for the particular domain, we look at the capabilities and we're going to figure out where or which system will actually provide those capabilities. And why is that important? Because that gives us an understanding of what is the integration landscape going to look like, what kind of stakeholders do we need to involve. So for instance, if we have to integrate with Shopify, there might be a Shopify team, we might have to work with a marketing team, etc., etc. Okay, so instead of just looking at requirements, we take a step back up, or like actually multiple steps, and take this elevated perspective to arrive here. Okay, the next one is now coming from 10,000 feet view down to the detail level and taking a business process deep dive. Again, it's not necessarily expected for us as architects to know every process in detail, but we want to have a really good understanding, especially around particular aspects of the business processes. And the benefit here really is that we are looking at the entire process and not just the feature level. Going through a checklist that I'm going to share with you in a second, we can address functional and non-functional aspects in order to make the right decisions. And it can help us to inspire further thinking and really understanding what we don't know. Because according to Aristotle, you don't know what you don't know. So if you take, for instance, here, the high-level process perspective of B2B, we see, okay, we have a reseller sends a request for proposal in, our sales user in Salesforce creates a quote and sends that quote, they submit an order, and we close the deal. That is what's going to happen in Salesforce, and that is our main concern. But here's the thing, by just looking here at those 4 steps in the process, we're not really getting the entire picture. So if we now take a further look into it and say, okay, what actually happens after the deal? Oh, they have to ship the order and they invoice the customer. And I appreciate that this is a very basic example, but I really kind of wanted to highlight what it is about. Because now that we are looking into what's happening towards the long tail of the process, we can actually think about, hey, what about quote templates that we need to generate? Or what about delivery times? Should we have an integration where we can automatically calculate expected delivery times? Do our resellers expect shipment tracking, etc., etc.? So I'm now going to share a basic checklist with you. And again, it's not, I'm not going through everything in detail. It's just going the high level aspects. First of all, what are the goals and the objectives of the process? In our previous process that we looked at is selling goods and invoicing the customer. What are the actors and licenses? So who's involved? What systems are going to fulfill particular responsibilities? Who owns the processes, etc., etc. What are business events in the life cycle? So what are the different stages that this process goes through? How does it evolve? What are the different conditions, etc., etc.? Of course, we also need to look into data and analytics. So what data is required in order to drive that process? What data integrity is required? What do we actually need in order to support reporting and analytics? And before I continue, just looking at those 4 different topics, you realize, okay, that is not something that is written, that is necessarily written down in the requirements. But by starting to ask those questions, we can actually further explore what this process is about in order to help us building the right thing, because that is ultimately what we want to achieve. What are the boundaries? So where does the process start and stop? Where are we going to hand it over? What are dependencies? So think about the shipping process. What are the information that we need to provide to the fulfillment system in order to organize that process? And of course, do we have any kind of regulations? What are they currently doing? So are we going to replace existing functionality? Or is the process that they're envisioning mature or not? Weapon number 3, the so-called business entity model. And this is really about the logical versus the physical reality. And If we think about data models, like there are a couple of challenges that we actually face with ERDs. So an ERD, or like really the entity relationship diagram, is the end state that we're working towards. Yeah. But it's physical, not logical. So it defines what are the objects that we're going to use, but it's really hard for business users to comprehend. Think about if you tell a business user, oh, we're going to use opportunities in order to manage your sales projects. Opportunities is Salesforce terminology, and it doesn't necessarily resonate with them by just looking at a pure data model. So we need to provide additional explanation. And normally it doesn't really include important attributes. And here's the thing. I coach CTAs, and one of the first things that I tell them is do not start with a data model. And you would actually expect the contrary, start with the data model. The problem is when you start with a data model, you already have a particular solution in mind without having the full understanding. So with the business entity model, we actually create a logical structure or representation of the business domain that we can then turn into the physical structure, which is our ERD. So let's look into an ERD. Here, what you can see, standard sales process, we have an account, we have the opportunity, we have a discount, and the discount is related to a product. Okay, good and fine if we have an educated business stakeholder that might actually be able to understand what we're talking here about. But it doesn't relate to the terminology that they're using internally. And what we also don't really know is like, how do those different pieces really fit together? What are the dependencies? So let me show you what the business entity model for the sales process could look like. Okay, there's a lot more information on here. It includes annotations, etc., etc. But what we can now see here is, for instance, that we have different customer types for our customers, and that we are using, or like that we're having discounts specified for each customer type or for multiple customer types, and that there is a dependency on the product type that we're using. So simply by looking at this business entity model, it will become clearer for us, how does the business operate, what are the dependencies amongst those objects, and we're going to use the right terminology for the business stakeholders. So we can go to them, play it back, and kind of inspire further conversation. Okay, so this is really where we're bringing business and technology together. Good. The next one that I would like to talk about is the gap analysis. Okay, so gap analysis is probably one of the most important tools that I had learned on my journey to, like when I became an architect. It's really a formalized approach to identify if a particular requirement can be met by something, or how we need to address gaps. And it really helps us to identify limitations, and we can use it for build or buy decisions. And of course, we can actually use gap analysis in order to justify our solution proposal. So let me give you an example. We're going to look at two different requirements. The first one is, if a deal is larger than $50,000, it must be reviewed and signed off by the user's line manager. So this is our analysis stage. What is the requirement? Now let's think about, is there any standard functionality that can be used in order to meet this requirement? Yeah, of course, there is a basic approval process because we can use the lookup field. But now looking at another requirement, what about the requirement that we have to get an approval or a sign off by a controller if the discount is bigger than 20%. But the problem here is that the controller is assigned to the account as an account team member. So using analysis, match and assess, can we use the standard approval process? No, because we can't dynamically access that lookup from the standard approval process because it's a related list. So let's identify our options. What can we actually do here? We can create a lookup on the account in order to access that. We could use a flow to query the approver initially before submitting it. We could use an Apex trigger to look it up, or we could use a custom Visual Force approval or Lightning approval process. Those are our options, but now the question is, how do we decide what's the right option out of those four? And here's where we are going to use our principles and our criteria. What's our effort going to be? What is the overall bigger picture? Is the solution option aligned with our principles? What is the impact going to be? Imagine if you are going to introduce like Apex code, how are you going to manage it down the line, and how can it be extended? Fundamentally, what we actually decided in the end in our project, where this example is based off, is we're going to use the flow in order to create the approval. And in order to really work with your gap analysis, you can use a different classification model. So you can use a fit gap analysis. You can define what are the different solution options, change types, etc., etc. And personally, I prefer using t-shirt size model because it just gives us like a relative way to measure the options. Last but not least, our fifth weapon is going to be systems thinking. And it's probably the most important aspect in the entire architect journey and applicable to every Salesforce professional. Okay? So systemic thinking is about understanding the entire solution as a system with its components and how the individual components are contributing to the result that we are trying to accomplish. And we are here taking a larger view from a technology side, but it's important because it helps us to understand the implication of our choices that we're making, and it helps us to avoid costly mistakes. So let me give you an example here to make that a little bit more tangible. We talked about using an online shop in order to serve B2C customers. So what if you integrate the webshop orders via a scheduled batch shop? It doesn't really matter what system you're going to use for that webshop. Yeah? But effectively, we have our orders coming in from the webshop, and they will be sent via batch into the order management system in order for the processing. So first thing that comes to mind is the orders are going to be processed with a delay. And what does that actually mean? If you think about that, the web shop sends the orders to the order management, but the order management then has to go to the inventory system, and inventory updates the availability in the web shop. So by processing it via batch job, the availability in the web shop will be wrong potentially, and we will have to accommodate for that. That's one implication. Second implication is we're going to process our orders in bulk, so multiple orders at the same time. And if you think about peak times, especially around Christmas, it's going to be beneficial in order to do that, because it helps us to reduce infrastructure cost and higher stability. Okay, so that was a 20-minute quick talk around the 5 secret weapons of a great architect. And I appreciate that we can't really go into too much detail, but I hope that is helpful for you guys. So let's think about how you can actually draw your weapons and how to make use of them. First of all, you're already going to have existing artifacts in your company, so you don't really have to reinvent the wheel. Look at what you already have and reuse those and recycle them as a starting point. You can actually start creating those artifacts and communicate with your teams in order to validate your tools that you're using. And I would suggest to create a governance framework around those artifacts and store them in a repository, especially when you're working on a project. And what I can promise you, by really using those 5 different weapons or tools, your design will significantly improve. So as a recap, what makes a great architect? It's about perspective. So we talked about the business capability map. We talked about models, here in particularly the business entity model, but also we abstracted our view of looking at our solution from a systemic view. It was about understanding. So understanding the gaps that our solution might have to address in order to meet requirements. And of course, understanding the business process in its entirety. And last but not least, it comes down to communication. And again, I'm going to give a talk around soft skills and communication. And what I also wanted to share with you guys today is the fact that we at Flow Republic have launched a communication bootcamp in order to really help you guys to become better communicators. So have a look in our booth or check out the URL bit.ly/virtual dreaming bootcamp in order to learn more about the communication bootcamp that we're going to start. Good. That gets me to 20 minutes and 30 seconds. Question is, do we have time for QA?
Yeah, we do. And let's pick up a couple of questions that I've noted down. So
Okay.
if you can throw your ideas there.
Yes.
First of all, thank you for this session. This has been amazing. Really great tips, on someone actually on, architect journey here. So first question we have is, what is the best way to draw technical diagrams for existing implementation, which give quick view of the flow, features used, and limits consumed?
Okay, sorry, I'm actually getting like ping notifications from the booth in parallel. So here's what I understood you asked me. So what are the recommendations of how to draw artifacts for existing implementations?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's an excellent question, and it really comes down to what are you trying to achieve. So I think creating those kind of artifacts for existing implementations is going to be helpful for two purposes, and I'm going to address how to do it in a second. But first of all, it's helpful if you're planning to actually run extensions, if you want to build additional functionality on top, because then you should use those in order to get a full understanding. Second of all, you should do that when you want to practice the creation of those artifacts. So now it really gets us to the how, and that's going to be the tricky part because it's very much dependent on the existing documentation that is present. Yeah. And a lot of the tools that we have talked about are subject to communicating with the business stakeholders as part of the process. So the question is, what is the accessibility? What I would suggest is to read any kind of architectural documentation, functional design specification, technical design specifications, solution design, whatever the terminology used within your company or within your project is for architectural documentation, and use those as a starting point. And then from there, dive into the requirements and try to recreate those artifacts. I hope that answers at least partially the question, because it's really hard to give you like a definite recommendation.
Yeah, that's awesome. One more question we can take is, how to deal with situation in CTA exam when your approach is different from the panelist.
I would suggest we are parking CTA questions for the CTA panels, because they're like, we are going to have two throughout the day. And I would rather answer questions around the tool specifically to help people who are here on the call for it.
Got it. So other question I have is architect supposed to challenge where client tries to achieve business objectives, like suggest going to selling to individual apart from the wholesale selling? Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. I think as architects, we have a responsibility to raise our concerns. Yeah, it's not for us to formally question, hey, what you're doing from a business operational perspective or from a business strategy makes sense. But personally, I think it makes sense for us to kind of voice what we are perceiving without inducing judgment, because sometimes, and maybe sales is a little bit specific, but in general, if we perceive something where we think it could be of value, kind of funneling that informally into the client organization might be of benefit. Yeah.
All right, awesome. I think we are done. One more question.
Wait,
I have,
Sebastian. Wait, before we move on to the last question. So here's one thing, and I know we are going to record this for YouTube, but sometimes customers do stupid things, and we have to tell them when they're doing stupid stuff. Okay. So just think about those clients that are expecting from us to kind of create recreate Facebook or something else on Salesforce. Okay, that is when we really have to challenge them. from a technology perspective, but operational, it's more informal. Sorry, I just wanted to expand on that.
No worries. I think that's great. So, Sebastian, one of the questions that our audience have is, I know, and I'm not super comfortable with this. Is like, are we sharing this recording? I might have to talk to our panel here, but are you going to share your slides somewhere? And the panel wanted to know, where they can find
Yes.
it.
Okay. So my understanding is that we are recording all the sessions and we'll make those available on YouTube in like a matter of weeks or months, but I'm not aware of the specific timelines. So the recording will be available. You can also sign up for the Flow Republic newsletter. We are going to share the slides at least with the people on our list. So it's not a cheap way for me to kind of get you on the list. But to be fair, like when I actually did like a specific page for Dreamforce, like only 10 or 12 people actually used it. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to do this time. Feel free to sign up, go to our booth, and we're going to send it out throughout the week.
All right. I think this was a great session. I see a lot of participants in this session. Just to give you an idea. But thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the event here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
We were just a bunch of nerdy kids who ignored the haters. We took their ridicule and we built on it. And when some of us gave up, well, we built on that too. Built resilience, built on a mission to make things a little better every day until the users came. Then the haters were VCs who scoffed at our audacity. This just isn't the way things are done. But we kept building. Users turned into teams, turned into companies, running their entire businesses on our apps. Then the software giants came after us. We weren't proven, we weren't fully featured, our radical cloud model wasn't secure. But we built on. And today, as companies adopt the cloud to move faster, teams are finding themselves slowed down by each other's efforts. The skeptics are claiming we'll never develop innovation at scale. But now, DevOps have come to the cloud, ushering in a new era of transformation. Companies can release on demand across hundreds of environments, innovating faster with fewer conflicts and fewer disruptions. There will always be challenges. There will always be naysayers. And we'll build on.